those people, like I'm offended on their behalf.
Yeah.
Like she was mad at me
Like
on my ex-girlfriend's behalf. I'm like, dude, she's not even mad.
She's not even mad. She's moved on.
I was dating a girl and she had a friend. And I remember after when her and I broke up and we go to parties and she'd always look at me funny. And I'm like, she wouldn't come near me. She'd leave. And I'm like,
she's like disgusted by you?
Yeah, or disgusted, or just mad or something like that too. And I remember a couple of years ago, I got drunk and I said to her, I'm like, hey, listen, I'm like, I still talk to her. Like literally, I had a conversation with her the other day. She knows Natalie. I talked to her about her husband. Like, we're still friends. I'm like, but you, which weren't even part of a relationship, can't get over how me and her broke up. First of all, who are you? Like, you're like a surface friend, you know? Like, and just like, you didn't even ask me what happened or anything. Too. Like, you didn't even ask her probably either.
Yeah. Welcome back, everybody. This is DC Talks with David Chinelli. I'm your co-host, Agent 00, and we've got a very special episode here for you today. We're talking about moving on, man. Moving on from situations. You know, a lot of
we just had a situation. Now, by the way, that's not your water, is that?
It's not my water, but it's there for a good prop.
Okay, there you go. Just making sure in case somebody else's water, you started taking a swig. I was like, all right, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, man, I'm looking forward to this episode. I think we talked a little bit offline about it. So it's about moving on and saying screw it to everybody. I'm out of here, right?
Exactly, man. There's a lot of things you happen in your life. Breakups, you know, moving on from relationships. It could be
like a business relationship, like
relationship.
Like you guys just had.
You know. Shout out to Alex. You know, great run of the Hustle of Everything podcast with Uplift Studios. And the thing about like moving on from situations, like even if they're good or bad separations, there's still like there's a tingling feeling of like, damn, like what a positive experience that was. And like, sometimes you want it back and sometimes, you want to move on from it. But I want to ask you, because moving on is something that we got to do every single day. Like maybe you lose a business deal or something like that. Where in your life have you had trouble like getting over something, DC?
Oh, wow. God, there's a lot, really.
There's a lot, eh?
Well, I remember when I got let go from Toronto Hydro, for example, that was a tough one to let go. Getting packaged out, fired, kicked to the curb, tossed out. It never feels good, right? It just feels like, even if it was something you didn't want to, like like I said, I was a treasury analyst. My job had changed tremendously from when I started. I didn't really like at the end, like it's more accounting than really treasury analyst and stuff too. It was funny. It wasn't like anything I love, but it's like, but somebody's, still saying they don't want you. It hurt. Right. It's still, I ended up reaching out to the boss. Well, I went through 7 bosses in a year. I reached out to the boss last year when we're talking about forgiveness, because honestly, even though I'm better off now than I was there, and he did me a favor, his Francois did a great favor for me, and I appreciate everything he did. At the time, it was still bitter. It took me years to get over that. Yeah.
Like, were you bitter at him?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, because I knew from the beginning that there's some issues like I knew it was going to happen since he was hired. It was just one of those things.
You saw the writing on the wall.
Yeah. You kind of feel it too. But then I reached out to him and I said, hey man, I just wanted, I think in LinkedIn, we were friends on LinkedIn. I said, just let you know, it's like, I know I appreciate, thank you again for the time we worked together. It was a little, I don't know if I told him I was bitter a little bit again, but I'm like, but I understand it was, the doors were opening for me. It was a good thing to get off my chest, and it was, but it's still like, and it doesn't bother me at night, like there are times, the other thing I still is hard for me to get over is like how things went down for university. If the hockey career was just, there were some things over there. So and it's funny how it comes up in your dreams once in a while. It just, as much as I've tried to make peace with it, like your subconscious doesn't let you go with it. And there's other times when I remember I was dating this girl, which I didn't think we were really dating, but then she's like, but she's kind of like, I didn't really feel anything for me. And I was like, and all of a sudden then they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, I didn't feel anything for her. But it was like, but then you're like counteractive. That then you started to feel something because there's the whole thing that they didn't want you. Yeah. And then, so there's a lot of those, right? That happens. Now it's just like, I don't know, they're just, at peace with, like, I'm trying to make peace with a lot of things in my life and trying to get over them, which I don't think as Italians, we like, at least our culture, we just,
you hold on to things.
That. You hold on to things. Yeah. My dad told, like, even when he was dying, he's like, I'm the revenger. We used to call him. Like, my cousins used to make fun of him. Like, he was, I'll never, like, he would almost like not forgive people in the sense. And I'm like, Dad, you can't really live that way, like, because holding on to things it manifests itself deeper root in your body, and it can come out as a physical form. If you're holding grudges and hating on somebody, there's that stat which was coming out, like how cancers and stuff are formed basically because people not forgiving other people.
It's the energy you hold on, the vibration in your body that creates like a negative sensation that impacts your whole bodily functions, which produces the sickness. And
like cancers are linked. That's like, I was like, cancers are linked to like I don't know how they scientifically link that, and some of the doctors might come at us for saying this stuff, but we're not the ones. This is just, again, I forget the article I was reading, but it was something on Instagram. It was like,
it's interesting.
Interesting.
Do you find that it's like the closure that you're looking for? For example, like when you think about the hockey, the girl from back in the day, is it the closure aspect that, or maybe certain things?
Do we really have closure?
I don't think you ever have closure.
I don't think none of us ever have closure.
Because you and I can have a conversation about closure, but then in retrospect, maybe a year or two later, I come back and like, damn, what I know now, I wish I was able to ask that person then. And that person is so far removed from the situation that even though if you have a chance to do it, it just seems so out of the the life scope. Like, like that's way in the past. Like, why do you care? And then if you were to see them in person, they may be
like, who are you?
Who are you? Like, what happened? I'm like, I'm not even emotionally attached to that situation anymore. So to even give you that level of it was funny.
It was funny too. I was dating this girl back in the day, and before Natalie and I, and in between. Back it was like 2006. And
is it the breakup period you guys had together? And then you
one of them. We had a couple of breakup periods. So anyway, this time I was dating a girl, and she had a friend which was friends of my cousin's good friend, and they ended up getting. And well, we did because we squalled them and stuff, and I remember after when her and I broke up, and we go to parties, and she'd always look at me funny, and she wouldn't come near me, she'd leave, and I'm like,
she's like disgusted by you,
or disgusted, or just mad or something like that too. And I remember a couple of years ago, I got drunk, and I said to her, I'm like, hey, listen, I'm like, you're all mad, you leave her every time. I'm like, I still talk to her, like literally, I had a conversation with her the other day. She knows Natalie. I talked to her about her husband, like. We're still friends. I'm like, but you, which weren't even part of a relationship, can't get over how me and her broke up. Does that make any sense? And it was like, you're harboring this hate towards me, which A, you don't know anything about. You had no idea what was going on behind the scenes. And the second one, I was just like, but first of all, who are you? Like, you're like a surface friend, and just like, you didn't even ask me what happened or anything. You didn't even ask her probably either. Because she's fine with me now too. It's like, so how are you harboring hate towards me? If the person you're trying, it's like being offended over somebody who doesn't realize they're offended. Those people, like, I'm offended on their behalf. Like she was mad at me on my ex-girlfriend's behalf. I'm like, dude, she's not even mad.
She's moved on.
God, I think some people just love to be miserable, and they love it. We have a couple friends like that. We have one friend, she's divorced now, and she's like, the whole world, she keeps fighting with her close friend. She can't understand why people keep leaving her live, like leaving her life, and like getting out of. Because I remember I saw her in the No Frills years ago with Matea, and she just started breaking down crying. We're like, me and Matea's looking at me like, what the hell's wrong with this lady? And she was just like, we were just having a normal conversation. There was no hate, and she just started like, she's always harvesting these negative emotions, and always crying on the drop of a dime, and how her world is so terrible all the time. And I'm like, how do you live like that? Like, and all of her friends are just like kind of pulling away from her. And now you know why. Like it's
man, when we're talking about this moving on things, like I don't really think we can ever truly move on, right? Because when we talk about like relationships, there's like, my ex, I was with her for like 5 years, and it's one of those things like when you're deeply in love with someone, and then one day I woke deeply. One day you wake up and like, I don't think this is gonna happen anymore. But I think it was the fact that we just called it quits, and that was the end of it. There was no
closure.
There's like the closure was very like surface level. It wouldn't really talk extensively about it. Like you move on, bro, and you move on. And especially when you're so invested in someone for that long, and then it just happens, it really eats at your life, because it shows you that, man, like, did they really care? Were they really about?
Well, I wouldn't say they didn't care, but I think maybe priorities changed. Maybe something in their lives just changed. So it's, I wouldn't say she didn't care, but maybe,
I don't know, man.
never. Maybe things had changed the last few years for her, you know, like, again, if you're not talking about it, sometimes you don't even know, right? And you might have had a superficial love in that kind of sense. And I hate to say that, but it could have been.
I don't think it was superficial though. I
mean, at the end of it, right? Well, if you didn't know why she didn't think that there was anything wrong with it or something happened like that, maybe it was more superficial than you thought it was.
And the thing is, I think it's like, even just like saying, yo, like, let's try work it out. I see why you're doing this. Like,
yeah.
I think just the fight, it just made me feel like I wasn't wanted or anything, or maybe I think that's what that ex-girlfriend happened to me too. Where I didn't think anything. And she's like, what do you mean you don't want me? I'm like, how do you mean you don't want me? I'm like, I don't want you either, but like, it doesn't matter. Like, how do you not want me? Like, how dare you? Yeah. It's like, I think it's in our,
I'm the best
innate nature to feel wanted, right? Even though like you're separating, but like, yo, at least try and fight for my love. Make me feel as if I'm making a bad decision. In other areas of your life though, has there been a business opportunity that you're like, damn, like, I wish I could have done that different because it was right on the line? And
no.
So
even if there was, I don't look at it that way. I can't.
Or something to advance you forward in a way that could impact your career. And
no, I'm a firm believer everything. This is so cliche. Everything happens for a reason. But I believe that, you know, like, I think we're set up, God sets us up in certain times, you're ready for certain things. And I think that's what happens, right? So like, I can say my dad, and when he was alive, I think he'd asked me when I was drafted to the OHL. So that's the major junior team, you know, it was grade 11. I made there. I went to Niagara Falls. I was one of 4 goalies drafted. I said I really didn't want to go because at that point, you either go to major junior or you try to get a scholarship to the States. And you can only stay basically there 48 hours. And then otherwise you can compromise your status as an NCAA player. Okay. So I went there for my 48, whatever we played. And I'm like, I thought I was doing well. And then I was like, okay, so my parents were there too. And I just, you know, I was playing well and everything else. I was, you know, did whatever I need to do. And my parents were asking me like, what happens for getting close to 48 hours? I'm like, I don't know. Let me just talk to coach. I'm like, hey, like, you know, 48 hours is coming up. Like, and next thing you know, they brought my parents in, they sat me down and there was hockey going on. The head scout was there and everything. And the owner of the team, they're like, we want to offer you a position. Like, what? I'm like, I'm not even supposed to be here. I'm just here to see if I was going to make it. I was just going to leave. Like, you know, you drafted 3 goalies before me. Like, you have this other goalie. They're like, no, we think you could be our guy.
franchise.
Yeah. I'm like, and anyway, I had some questions and things like that too. And they were basically, they gave me a week to decide if I wanted to come or not. They, you know, they were going to give me a scholarship on top if I didn't play pro. But my gut was saying to me, I'm just not ready. I knew I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready mentally. I know I wasn't ready emotionally. I was very much a child, grade 11, like going into grade 12. I was not mature. I was very immature to move away from home. I was starting to get homesick, even though my parents were there. I was homesick from staying at home in my own bed. Something about the whole experience didn't feel right to me. So I didn't go. Right. And people asked me at the time, like, are you ever, you know, regretful that you didn't accept the OHL? I said, not a chance. And I said, I wasn't ready for it. Like, you know, in your opportunities and like, and there was something about that feeling, even though it presented itself like the Holy Grail.
Like you have everything.
Yeah.
So the structure.
Exactly. The fastest route to the NHL was through the OHL. Okay. Ontario Hockey League. That's major junior. That's the fastest way, not for goalies necessarily, but that was always the fastest route. Right. That's, you can get a World Juniors. You get like, that's where you get the most exposure. You play the most hockey. But no, there was something telling me no. So when people ask me, "Do you ever regret, you know, turning down decisions?" Like, no, never once. You know, there's some decisions I made on the play some teams. I'm like, no, I'm like, I learned something every single time. I'm like, I don't, and again, I don't like thinking of the should haves, could haves, would haves. I still meet with people, like I have friends of mine that aren't successful. They still talk about that. I'm like, don't you get it? This is why you haven't moved on. Like think about it. Like, stop thinking about what could have been 20 years ago. You're 45, 46 years old.
They still talk about like their
the
athletic
days,
the girl days, or like when they play and they're that chick they didn't talk to. Is that so? Or is it like I could have made the pros if I had this one big break?
Yeah, or you talk about I could have had this girl, or I could have had that girl, or like there's that talk too amongst hockey players.
I think as men, that's natural though, because we always look at the grass is green on the other side, especially when you feel this discontent with your current relationship, and you start comparing, like, damn, like I remember this chick had good qualities that would have been compatible for me at this point in my life.
Sure,
right?
Yeah, but I guess that's true too. But again, we can't live our lives in either the future or the past.
Absolutely.
So I find, like, I think a lot of the mental issues people have right now is because they're doing one of those two things. If you're too much worried about what's happening in the future, that's how you have anxiety, right? If you dwell too much on the past, that's how depression creeps in.
Yeah. On that thing about the sports, man, I always had this thing. I was like, man, if I was like 6'8", bro, I'd definitely be in the league, right? Because DC, if you saw my jumper, lethal.
You believe this guy, Isaac? He's talking props about a sport. But yeah, anyway, like, dude, come on.
I'm joking, bro. I'm so done with it. But I still think about
it. Is he? I don't know. Are you really done with it?
I'm done.
You're still talking about your jump shot.
My jumper is so good right now. I'm like, man, if I had the height, who knows what could have happened?
Well, I say before too, like, I probably work out more now than I worked out a lot as a kid. I think I was probably smaller, but I'm way stronger now than ever being, like, it's like I'm bigger than I, like, in the sense, like I play hockey now. It's like I could probably play better. Maybe my fast twitch fibers maybe not be as much as whatever. But bro, if I was playing now too, it's like, I would compete, what I mean? I can still compete with my own self, you know what I mean? So you think about those stuff too, and I'm like, but it's a different point of life, right? Like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't think about, like, I don't dwell on, like, thinking, I'm like, well, what if I didn't go to the school, or what if I didn't do this, or what I do that? I don't know. And I don't think it's healthy for us to do that either.
And what are healthy ways of coping with certain things and attaching yourself from those things that perhaps
there's a great author who came and talked to a broker. I went to Keller Williams had this. I've seen this guy perform a couple of times, but Keller Williams had like this rah thing, so Keller Williams is a big brokerage, and they always try to recruit other people and stuff. So you're allowed to bring other realtors into their annual thing, right?
Yeah.
And they had this author, and it was it The Miracle Morning? You've heard of that? I think let me just Google that if I said that right. And I'll tell you the name of it. It's a Miracle Morning, and there's like 7 steps or something you do, right? And sorry, the internet here is ridiculously slow. Anyway, what he was talking about there really resonated well with me. This is back in like 2019. He's like, he got into a car accident, wasn't expected to walk. In like a few weeks, he's walking. Then he was like he was supposed to die. There's all these things that should have happened. And he's just like, and the doctors kept coming back to him and his parents and said, we think there's something wrong with your son. And they said, well, why? What's going on? Like, is he not able to walk? He's like, no, but he's like, he's not grieving. There's no, like, he's not going through the usual steps. People are like, usually they're sad. And he's like, no, he's very optimistic and he's smiling. And they're like, okay. They're like, that's not normal. Like, well, you haven't met our son, right? And his whole thing, which resonated well with me, was like, he learned, well, what's the point of me being miserable? Like, I'm spending all this energy doing this, being miserable.
Yeah.
Why? Like, is it going to change your position? And we're all thought of in the crowd. We're like, no, he didn't. If he said, I'm like, well, we go, so here's a trick. He goes, if you get upset or something happens, he goes, feel all of that, but give it a time limit. Put 5 minutes on your watch. After the 5 minutes, let it go. So you've acknowledged what's happening. You've internalized it. You've grieved for it. Now let it go. And he goes, eventually you're not going to need all the 5 minutes. Like, that's interesting. And then I've tried it. I find, there's a time to be. I always used to say it to Natalie too. So when we were growing up and we were dating when we were younger. I say growing up because we were kids when we were dating. And she couldn't understand sometimes I get upset. And I'm like, just stay away from me. I'm like, why? I'm like, if you poke me right now, it's going to make it exponentially worse. Yeah. And it had nothing to do with her. I was upset if something happened in the house. I was upset of a hockey game. I was like, let me be upset. So this is why this resonated with me. For me, it was a little longer than 5 minutes. But back then I was like, and then when I break out of my shell, I'm fine. And then as if she goes, you're like 2 different people. I'm like, yeah. but you have to let me go through my own process. Once I do that, I'm like, it has nothing to do with you. And it was like, most of the time I wasn't even, like 99% of the time I wasn't even angry at her. It had nothing to do with her. She just happened to be in a spot where I was already angry. Yeah. And I was like, and I'm like, and she realized now, or being married at the time, she realized that too. So when I'm being a dick, which, can you imagine me being an asshole? Come on,
You're the best guy ever.
Yeah. I'm 100%. I could be a dick. But that's the idea. If you let me do that and I get through that. Now, if I persist to that too, like I was angry. Natalie and I had around New Year's, we talked about this offline, and I was upset with her. And there was a reason for me to upset. And I was upset for more than 5 minutes because I thought we had a legitimate idea, like upset. And I wasn't going to let it pass until we talked about it. But I wanted her to come, and if she wasn't coming, I was like, I was just done with it. And finally she came and we talked about it, and it was gone. We hugged it out. I gave her a kiss, and it was like, okay, but we have to get through that. Yes. So that's another coping mechanism. If you're upset about something and you don't explain to the other person what you're upset about, how are they ever going to know? How are you going to resolve that? Like my brother, we talked about before, he likes being miserable, I think half the time. And he may watch us, and I say this all the time, you like being miserable. I'm like, but then he just attacks people, but doesn't expect, like, he just sometimes attacks people just to attack them. Like, that's not good either, right? Like that's not what you want to do. So some of the techniques I would say would be, one, be upset about it for 5 minutes, let it internalize, figure out what you're upset about, and then let it pass, and then talk about it. You don't always have to talk about your feelings, but at least tell them, like, if you're mad at another person and they have, especially if they have no idea, explain to them so this doesn't happen again. So you avoid this again.
Yeah. In our lives, right, there's things that happen to us and things that we do to other people. There are things that you've said to someone, and there's things you wish you could have said to someone that you're like, damn, I wish I had said this if I had that chance to do it. And you never really get over that. Have you ever gone through one of those, like, where you've said something that, man, I wish I could have that back because I did more damage?
Yeah, of course. We've all done that. I just can't think of anything right now.
Can't think of anything.
Yeah, because in certain times you'll see somebody and then it'll pop in your mind, right? I'm like, oh shit, I probably shouldn't have said that. But,
yeah, there's a lot of things I've done out of character, right?
Yeah.
I think
But why are you still holding on to it?
It's because I think the way it made that person feel, like I think you've known me for some time now, and I'm not really one to get really angry or to like have like this temper or anything like that. But I think in that moment, I think it's two things. One is the fact that they made me lose my cool like that. And two is the fact that I did lose my cool and the way it made them feel. It was like unrecoverable. Like, I cannot believe you did that to me, right? So,
but do you understand anger is an emotion? We're all like, Jesus got angry. When he went to the temple, he overturned all the tables because it was happening. Being angry is an emotion you should feel. If you're not getting angry, one of your emotions you're born with, you should. But
but the things you say in that moment, like, you can't recover from that.
Sure, right? Like, obviously you can't put toothpaste back in the tube. I get it.
You can't put milk back in the bag of milk.
Yeah, you can.
In the bag of milk?
Okay, you just cut the top off, you just scrape it in. That shit you can do.
Us Canadians know what we're talking about.
But the toothpaste in the tube is harder to put it back in.
Yeah.
You can't put a poop back in your ass, can you?
That's
a bad way. That's a gross way of thinking of it, but it's the same idea. But no, like, listen, sometimes, you leave the scar will still remain, but it does get healed over, right? So, there's always a saying, and which I still like, you forgive. We're taught to forgive, but you don't forget.
I was going to ask you about that too.
Yeah, you forgive. You forgive, but you don't forget.
You don't forget. And the forgetting, that is, it can be contradictory to moving on, because to really move on, it's like you truly move on.
But the forgiveness is one thing. The forgetting can also helps you grow to not do something again. It's like when you learn from your mistakes. So, like there's certain things, it's like, like what happens with your family, like you have an interaction, like, we've had fights with your brothers and stuff too. And it's like, okay, Like, I had a fight with my brother for 8 months. I didn't talk to him, and I said to him, like, listen, he's like, oh, I don't think you ever forgive me. I'm like, listen, I forgive you. I forgive you. But just remember, and I explained to him what happened. I'm like, but it doesn't mean I forget what happened. I'm just not going to let him do it. Because if it starts to happen again, like, then we're starting from ground zero. So it's not contradictory. It's remembering what happened, forgiving from what happened, understanding that too. But if this person continues to do that over and over again, how's that helping a relationship? That's contradictory. Because, oh, you forgive me once, so forgive me 7 times, right? Like, no, but
you can't do that.
You can't do that. Like, we're taught to forgive, as Christians, we're taught to forgive, but at some point you got to move away from somebody. If they're continuing to stab you, you're not just going to go there freely. Like, somebody stabs you, like, okay, I forgive you. I'm like, okay, stop, keep stabbing me. Like, then no, you're the fool. So I don't think it's contradictory at all.
And for those people who've dealing with like a loss in loved one, right? I've lost family members, so have you. What are some healthy ways that you adopted to truly moving on and actually, because you as again what you just said, you're never going to forget, because that memory lives on. But what are healthy ways that you can actually cope with dealing with loss from your experience?
I had a conversation with one of my clients earlier this morning before we walked in. She lost a baby at 6 months, 5.5 months.
Wow.
And had to give birth and do the whole thing. And it's a profound loss.
Yeah.
We had to, my sister-in-law lost the baby at 8 months before her and Matea. So Natalie and her were pregnant at the same time. And Matea was supposed to be, and her son would have been Joseph. But at 8 months, the placenta got detached, and unfortunately, the baby didn't make it. So I'll be honest, sometimes there's not a lot of positive things you can say into that, except you still show somebody you haven't met how much you love them, how much they mean to you. Because of that, maybe my sister-in-law's body was now understood what the body needs to nurture a baby moving forward. Because as you talk to somebody who's had one child, two child, like the first child, your body doesn't know what they're doing. The second time, your body's already like old hat. It already knows. It just adapts. It's quicker. It's like bang, 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 right? Talk to people who have 4 kids. They're like, yeah, it's old hat. Your body already knows what to do. It bounces back way quicker. So what I was saying to my client through what happened with the experience with my sister-in-law was that your body now knows what to do. So your baby will be more protected the next time around, and your body will know what to do. And it'll be like, so there's a positive. So again, not taking away from any of the loss, right? But learning to grow from that. What is that the experience going to bring to you? I obviously lost my dad. And my dad was 72. I was 36 years old. Huge loss. Obviously, didn't expect it to happen. And we've talked about that in the pod before. Yeah. And this is what I explained to my client. I've said this to people before. It's like, listen, you don't heal from that. To think that your heart will never be the same. And I don't mean it in a bad way. You don't want your heart to heal, because the way that the people think is like, that means almost like my dad never existed. That's not what you want. Your life just changes. You learn to deal with that. Like the way that we see your heart, like your piece of my heart is missing. Now it's scarred over and stuff too, but I don't want to miss that piece. I like having that hole there now, because it reminds me that he was there. It should never be fully over. So I embrace everything about that experience, right? Because we're all going to die. I would love to have had my dad 30, 40, 50 more years. I think we all would have. That would have been amazing. Well, 30 years, he would have been at 102. But you know what I mean? Like it would have been amazing to have him there. But I don't blame God for that. I don't blaming doesn't get anywhere. I have family members that lost their mothers and dad, and they blame God for that. And I'm like, how? Like he's the one who gave you life. Like he's not the one that took it away. Like you can't always be living life blaming somebody else. And it was, but the bitterness you still see with people, and it's just, and they turn away from God. I'm like, are you better off now not having God in life because you're mad of like that something's eventually going to happen to all of us happened a little earlier than you expected.
Yeah.
Like, or maybe this, I just don't understand that. You know, I don't get it. So I don't know if this is answering your questions or not too.
No,
we're going a little deeper, but how do you deal with loss? Realize it's going to happen to all of us. And you're also going to be off this earth. There's going to be people grieving you. So try to live your life as amazingly as you can every single day. Appreciate the ones that are around you. Tell the people that you see every day how much you love them.
Yeah. And that's why even, by the way, thanks for sharing that. You know, I know a lot of these things are deep, and
I didn't cry. I almost did, but I didn't cry this time.
I know, man, but I just, thanks again for sharing that, DC, for real.
Yeah.
So even I was telling you earlier, I'm like, man, I appreciate you, you know, like it's a blessing. I'm like, yo, give you your props, because listen, I can go in the subway, I can do whatever, and you never know. You never know. So my habit, and sometimes people like can reject it by saying, no, bro, like, you know, they get to show affection sometimes. And I think as men, we reject it because we kind of see it as a feminine thing, right? Yeah. And I've felt that too.
I had my buddy in university. I used to tell him all the time I love him, like my buddy Josh.
Yeah.
And I hug him. I used to give him a kiss. He's like, dude, why you like it? Like we're always worried about the gay thing. Like, we're not gay or not something too. And I'm like, and again, there's nothing wrong with that, as they would say in Seinfeld. But it was just like, I'm like, but I treat him like a brother. I'm like, no, this is what we used to do. Like this, to me, it's my affection. I never want you to not know that I love you. And that started and I started doing that back this like 25 years ago. And until this day, like, you know, and now he started to say it back to me. I think we talked about before, and it was like beginning, he was just like, he was a little weirded out by it. Yeah, that happens. And I'm like, but I'm like, listen, I'm like, Josh, I'm like, you know, I'm like, you're one of the closest people in my life. If something happens to me, I want you to know that I love you. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing wrong with telling that. And I'm like, just, and so even on text messages, I'm thinking like, and I won't let him get off the phone. Sorry, the text message, I'll say I love you. But he made a point. He goes, I wouldn't let him get off the phone because he was living in Wisconsin. Now he's in Nashville, but I wouldn't let him get off the phone until he said he loved me. Because I know, I'm like, listen, I know you do. He goes, like, you know, I know it. I'm like, just say it.
Yeah, just say it.
Just say it. And maybe I push him a little in a good way, but now he says, but he appreciates it. But back in the time when you're like, you know, 25, you're a big hockey player, you know, strong dude, you don't want to say another bro, bro,
I love you, bro.
And he also didn't have brothers, so it's a little bit weird. He had sisters, so maybe it's easier, right?
It's easier. It's a different upbringing.
But I don't find it emasculating. Oh, sorry. See, I was going to cry. Look, my nose started dripping right there. My emotions are getting ahead of me again. I don't think it's emasculating. I think it's empowering, telling people that, you know, that you have this vulnerable side to you. Like, do you think I'm less of a man by saying that I love you? I don't think so. I'd hope not. You know, would you try to take advantage of me all of a sudden? Because I'm like, no, I don't think so. What's wrong with telling somebody? I hate the whole macho thing, like, you know, my dad used to, you know, he just come home and just grunt and drink beer and just never say no. But I knew he loved me. I'm like, but he never said it, but I knew he did. I'm like, fuck that. Tell your kids. My kids get embarrassed how many times I tell them I love them. Like, Dad, stop. Well, it's even times like, hey, Mila, I got a secret for you. What's that, Dad? I love you. It's not a secret. She used to get upset at me. And then Mateo, too, I got a secret. No, you don't.
But you know what? When they get older, they're in their 40s or 50s. You're there with your grandchildren. They're gonna cherish those moments. Those are the days they're like, man, I remember my dad. Like, they'll look at you with admiration. And the thing is, I believe, DC, as they get older, they're vetting guys to marry and start a family with. They will model that person after you. And they don't even know it, because I think you're so far ahead in life that, you know, doing those things matter and shaping the outcome of your children's happiness and the love they get from other people.
Well, I think a lot of it was like, there was those studies talking about like the kids' depression and stuff too. And it's like having a male figure in the home, like leads to like success and for mental health, you know, and just showing a strong male presence in the home, right? Not being a deadbeat dad or being the crap of your kids, which is, there's no part of that in this world, right? But yeah, like, so yeah, I'm like, yeah, makes sense. You know, why would it not? Like, well, I also believe having a strong female figure as well. Like, I think our kids are blessed. knowing that
You have two parents
they have
that
two
love.
parents that love each other very much, and we're supporting each other. And you can do whatever you want, right? Like in the sense that like you can be successful. It's like we're encouraging, we're giving you the tools to do the thing, like just by showing your affection. Like one of the things I would say for if you want to have a strong foundation as a family, try to eat at least one meal together a day.
At the table.
Facing
each other. No phones, no nothing. No iPads.
That's right.
Yeah. Put on some nice music and actually just chat.
You don't even have to put on music. Talk. Game nights are great too. We try to do game nights and stuff too. Julia, actually, my assistant, she bought us a game we called Catan, and it's like about all these resources stuff too. And it's like it's kind of like a Monopoly game too. It's really cool. But yeah, we've got into that, and we're like, anyway. Long story short, my word of advice before we start to wrap up: letting things go, but you might have to let a lot less things go if you have a good foundation in your family, and that starts with getting to know your family and having dinner together is and praying together is a big one too. So we pray before, like that's a big part of it. And on Saturdays, because it's the Sabbath day, I try to read the Bible, try to force my kids, try to get them to know God. And I think those that pray together and those that eat together, those that pray together stay together, but also those that eat together stay together as well.
Everything.
Yeah.
And I think that was beautifully said, by the way. I just want to give you your props on that. I think for what I would say too is what I've learned is you're always going to regret the shots that you didn't even take and things that you wanted to do. I think those are some of the stuff that you really can't, you have a challenge from moving on because you knew that intrinsically from a divine level, I should have taken that step. So that's one thing I would leave off like from saying that if you feel it, if you want to go do it, go and make it happen.
Yeah.
Because the one thing we can't control is time. And time is constant and you can't get that time back. So I actually made a video about this on TikTok too. Living without expecting some sort of results or some specific outcomes. So if you're going to go talk to that person, they look interesting, go do it. If you're going to go pursue a different career path, make it happen. Because those are some of the stuff that you'll really have a hard time moving on from if you don't just take the action. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Very lovely conversation, DC. Thanks for opening up again as usual. It's an honor to hear these stories. And we'll see you next week for episode 69. DC, I know you said a lot, but any last words?
Yeah, I would 100% like be in the moment, feel it. If something negative happens to you, and it happens to all of us, feel it, understand it, but also don't give it too much attention. Feel it for that 5 minutes. Start with that timer. Yeah. Try to get that feeling over it. Understand how it's shaping and molding you, and then get rid of it.
What's that thing you say? You take a deep breath. Take a breath of life, like the God. Yeah. You and I had this conversation before.
Yes.
Like,
well, they also every time you breathe in, you breathe out, you say God's name.
God's like Yeshua, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Not Yeshua. It's Yahweh.
Yahweh. So cleanse yourself of the energy.
Exactly. And there's a reason why God is putting you through these trials and tribulations. You got to understand that. Learn from what is happening, and it'll make you stronger and better person for it. Remember, every hard time you've ever had in your life, you've made out every single time. You have 100% success rate. So this time, if you're having a hard time, guess what? 100% you're going to make out of it. You're going to get out of it again. 100% of the time, you've made it through the bad times. This is just another one of those times.
Amen to that. Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe to the podcast on all platforms. Follow DC at David V Chinelli _realtor on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we'll see you next week. Peace out, everybody.
Bye.